Zebra BI Tables is an extremely versatile visual. It will allow you to create beautiful tables, cross tables, calculation tables, and other table chart combinations. It is used for variance analysis, for income statements, cash flow statements, and other types of reports. And it will allow you to design beautiful tooltips as well as complex matrix chart combinations. Think of it as a pivot table on steroids. So let me illustrate the use of the Zebra BI Tables visual with a couple of practical examples. We'll start with comparison tables. Comparison tables or variance tables are reports where you break down your values by a certain data field and compare this to a comparison, a benchmark, like a plan, a previous year, and so on. So, as in my example here, I'm comparing my actuals to my previous year, and as you can see, the variance to previous year, both the absolute variance and the relative variance, is also shown on the table. Okay, so let me remove this visual here and try to recreate the example. The Zebra BI Tables visual is here, so let's put this onto the page. And now I will throw in my sales data, break this data down by a group of business units. Like this, I have the breakdown, and now I will do the comparison. So to create a comparison, simply take your comparison measure. In my case, this is going to be previous year's data. Okay, the comparison is done. If I simply open the table, make it wider, you will see that I already have a column for my previous year, a column for my actuals, and also two additional columns that the Zebra BI Tables visual has calculated within the visual and displayed appropriately on the visual itself. So you do not have to calculate the variances like absolute variance to previous year, absolute variance, relative variance to previous year, absolute variance to plan, relative variance to plan, and so on. This is all done automatically by the visual itself. So in turn, basically, your Power BI model will be greatly simplified. Okay, so once you have the comparison in your table, you will notice that the default behavior of visual is responsive, meaning if you make the visual more narrow, what happens is certain columns will be shown or will be hidden based on the space available, or in my case here, the display of the relative variance will switch from a chart to a table column with numbers. And if you make it even smaller, my absolute variance will pop into the basic chart or switch to this so-called integrated variance chart to make sure that the space is optimized and that the display of information is clear and legible, even if you're designing for a narrow screen like a mobile phone. So if you make it really, really small and narrow, you see it's still, the most important information is still here, and it'll be legible also on a mobile device. Okay, now if you have enough space so that all the columns are displayed, the Zebra BI Tables will allow the users to create certain actions out of the box. The most obvious one is sorting. Okay, simply by clicking on a header of any column, you will sort the data descending or ascending, or switch to custom order, meaning an order that is specified in your Power BI model. So you can switch between the sort order on any column. meaning you can do this also on the relative variances, for example, to display the fastest growing units, or to display the laggards here, or sort by simple actual value, and so on. Next thing, you can show or hide any column. For example, if I don't need to have my values for the previous year here displayed, you can open the column design form available on this little down arrow here, and you'll find the option called Hide Column. Okay, simply click this and the column is hidden. It is still on the visual, it's just hidden from this display. Okay, so my design here is more focused on, the visual presentation and so on. However, the Zebra BI tables visual provides two views, and any user, including a user who is just the viewer once you publish this report, will be able to click here on the arrow and basically just slide to change the view. And now in the second view, all the columns are displayed. So this basically allows you to design two views for the end users, and it's a good practice to have more visual view by default, and then just let people know that they can click on the slider then to get all the data and just read through the numbers if they need all the numbers for their analysis. Okay, now this was the comparison with previous year. Okay, now you can put more comparisons into the Zebra BI tables visual. Actually, you can bring in 4 basic measures for start. Let me pull in my plan here as well. Okay, so now I have added my plan, and I will also bring back my previous year value. So now you see that I have 3 basic values: my previous year data, my data for actuals, my plan, and also all the comparisons. The absolute variance to previous year, absolute variance to plan, and both relative variances. Now the exact order of the columns is also flexible. You can change the order anytime. For example, if I want to put plan in front of my actuals, simply click on the column header and move it around. So basically just drag the column to the desired position, and this is how you reorder columns in your Zebra BI tables visual. You can do the same thing with the variances. So for example, you can put the variance to previous year together and then the variance to plan at the end. You can even do things like have the plan far on the right side and actuals in the middle of the table. So whatever the structure in your company is, or whatever fits your situation best, you can simply do it with a drag of a column. Okay, so this is the basic functionality of the tables. Of course, you have a lot of additional settings. So make sure to explore the settings. You can control the exact format of all the labels in the table. You can change the design, you can adapt the colors, any colors, font types, font sizes, and so on. So there are lots of settings available to tweak the design and make sure that the design fits the final purpose of your report. Okay, now moving on with the next example. Once you have the comparison, a typical action is to create a hierarchical table. Okay, so a typical requirement is once you have a breakdown by one data field, you'll probably want to add another data field like this and just drop your additional data field into the category placeholder. This will create a hierarchical table. So Zebra BI tables visual will present little expand collapse buttons here so that you can collapse all the rows, so have very compact display, and then the end user can open any branch by simply clicking here or right click on a certain level in your hierarchy and choose the expand entire field, for example, so just to quickly collapse or expand the rows that are displayed in the hierarchy. And the number of levels in your hierarchy is not limited. So basically you can have 3 levels, 4 levels, 7 levels. It's completely unlimited, so you can add multiple fields into the category placeholder, or you can just take the whole hierarchy and just drop it into the category here. So this is how you create hierarchical tables in the Zebra BI tables visual. Okay, next thing is that you can actually create a hierarchy also in columns. By doing that, you will create a so-called cross table or a cross tab. Let me show this by adding an additional field into the columns. How do you do that? Let's start with a quarter. So I'll take the quarter, and this time I'll add this data field into the group placeholder. Once I do that, you see that in my column structure, I now have all the quarters, so 4 quarters, and for each quarter I have the comparison that I have made before, so previous year versus actual, and the variance to previous year. Now, in the Zebra BI tables, you can actually change the design of each column separately. So, for example, you can switch the display of any column to another chart type. For example, let's try something like this. This would be waterfall, a vertical waterfall chart. Let's sort it by the value of the variance, or you can switch to a table column. So this functionality of switching between the charts and so on is available also in the cross tables. Now, once you have a cross table, you will find that under the Add Columns button here lies the option to show the grand total as well. So if I have all of my quarters, maybe I'm also interested what's the grand total, and in my case that would be the year, the full year. So if I try to collapse the, let's try to minimize the columns here to make sure everything fits. You see at the end I now have the grand total. By expanding the selection here, I can actually rename the grand total as well, so I can actually call it full year or something, you know, meaningful like that. So I can simply rename the grand total on the visual itself, directly on the visual. Next, you can create a hierarchy also in your columns. So in my case, I can take the month and simply put it under the quarter data field in my group placeholder. Okay, so now I have 2 levels of hierarchy in my columns. And once you have this, you can expand and collapse certain groups within my columns, much like you do expand and collapse the rows in your hierarchy in your rows. So I can just close quarter 1, quarter 2, Q3, maybe leave the Q4 open, and then as I scroll to the right side, I will find the full year at the end. Now, if you have at least 2 levels in your hierarchy in columns, then you will see another option under the Add Columns, little plus button here, which is called Show the Subtotals. So if I have now the results for January, February, March, by adding the subtotals, I will have January, February, March, and also the subtotal for the Q1 group. So this is effectively my Q1 result here. I can actually rename it to Q1 or anything else, and this is how you can create cross tables with multiple levels in your columns, and also add the subtotals and the grand total in the column structure. So this feature is quite useful, not just to create monthly tables like I have just demonstrated, but also other types of grouping. One interesting option here would be to take period calculations, for example, and put them into the group placeholder. So as you see, you can display monthly results, year-to-date results, and full-year results. This, of course, makes sense if you have a monthly slicer like this. So now I have my June results and June year-to-date results, and then I could have also the full-year results as well at the end. So I can put the period calculation and use it as a grouping field to create performance tables or variance tables that compare different period calculations. Okay, so this was a quick overview of the crosstabs here. Next type of tables that are needed in reporting, especially in financial reporting, are the so-called calculation tables. Okay, the calculation tables are the basis for reporting on income statements, cash flow, balance sheets, and similar, mostly financial type of statements. The requirement here is that, and also why are they called calculation tables? The thing is that in those type of reports, the data set that you have is actually a calculation. So in my case, I have a P&L, and in my P&L, in my income statement, I have product revenue, service revenue, and then I have the total revenue. Okay, so my total revenue is simply a sum of the two rows above the revenue. Okay, so this is already a calculation. It's actually an intermediate result or a subtotal. So Zebra BI tables will allow you to mark this row as a subtotal. So I can right-click here on the revenue, and as you see, the option of result is chosen. So without this, this would be a normal waterfall chart here, but because I know that the revenue is a type of a result, a type of a subtotal, I can right-click and mark this row as a result. Okay, and moving on, my next item is a type of a cost. So a costs, expenses should be subtracted from my revenue. That's why I can again click on this row and invert the product cost so that it will be subtracted from the revenue. And this is how you create a calculation in your table, which is important for income statements, P&Ls, pricing calculations, and other types of mostly financial reports. And this works really nicely with the Zebra BI tables. Okay, moving on to a few more practical features that might come handy. On top of the 4 base scenarios that you can add to the Zebra BI tables visual, you can also add additional measures. In my case here, the portfolio share of my business units, for example, is calculated and added to the visual on top of the comparison to previous year. How do you do that? As you see here in the values placeholder, I have 2 measures. Okay, so basically, if I remove this, this is my basic comparison table. Now I can take another measure, my portfolio share here, and simply add this as a secondary measure in my values placeholder. Okay, the values placeholder allows you to add up to 20 additional measures that you calculate in your Power BI model and simply bring into your Zebra BI tables visual. Now this column here is again extremely flexible, so it can be just a simple text column with numbers. You can change it to a chart like this, maybe a different type of chart, dot chart for percentages, for example. You can individually set the number format of each individual column, so you can display this in you know, to 2 decimal places, 1 decimal place. You can change it to thousands, millions, and so on. Of course, this won't make sense on a percentage, but you do have all the options here to make sure that the number format in each individual column matches the most meaningful selection for the end user. So you can bring additional columns. Now, bring in additional columns into the Zebra BI tables opens a vast pool of options, you know, how to design tables, what to add to your tables, and so on. So it is important that you have, you know, more options to mark each individual column and actually let Zebra BI know what type of measure is displayed. For example, here I have added the variance the previous year for gross profit to my table for the sales. Okay, so it is another measure that will display a variance, which is why I will now open this and change the type of the measure to an absolute variance. Okay, once I did this, Zebra BI knows exactly that this is a type of a variance, and when you will, as you see, by default, negative variance is displayed in red already. And also, if I change this column now to a chart, display it as a chart, you will see that it's actually displayed as a plus minus variance chart, because Zebra BI know that the measure type is a variance. Okay. With this functionality, you can create complex performance tables with a part of the table that is a comparison table and a lot of additional columns that make sense. If you have certain groups of measures, like sales measures on one side and gross profit measures on the other side, you can even take advantage of a concept called the scaled groups, where, for example, you can take one column and assign it to a specific group of other columns to make sure that this column will be scaled to all the other charts in the group. Meaning the axis of all the charts will be synchronized by default for all the columns that are placed into a specific group. So if it's just an individual column, it looks like this. But if I now move it not to my scale group number 1, but rather scale group number 2, where I have all of my gross profit measures, like this, now the variance for the gross profit is visually scaled, rendered in the same scale as my gross profit column, because both of those columns are in group number 2. So this is the concept of scale groups that is also available in the Zebra BI tables visual. Another quick example here would be a P&L statement compared to previous year or plan and so on, with common size measures like percent of revenue. So now I know how much exactly is the gross margin in percentage, what is the operating income as a percent of the revenue, and also on top of that also how the percent of revenue, so the structure in the revenue, has changed from the previous year. Has my operating income as a percent of revenue grown from previous year, exactly for how many percent points, and so on. So these are all types of tables and reports that you can create within one single Zebra BI tables visual. So to conclude my demo, I would just like to mention a couple of more major features that Zebra BI tables allow you to do. So one thing is the top N plus others feature, which you get by right-clicking on any name in your categories and selecting the top/bottom N item from the menu. Okay, now a window is presented where I can turn on the top plus bottom feature. Let's try top N by my actual value. I could do actually top N by variance as well, but let's do a top N by my actual sales, and I'll just return top 8 items. Okay, so now I have my top 8 business units in my data set. And in addition to that, Zebra BI has automatically calculated the others row, which is presented visually on the visual itself, and now you can decrease the number of elements displayed, so just top 7, decrease to top 6, or increase, and so on. Even the end user in the view mode, once you will publish your report, will have this option to reduce or increase the number of items displayed. Furthermore, you can highlight certain important rows with different colors. You can freeze or unfreeze row headers, column headers, grand totals, and so on. So if you have a long table and the user will scroll to the right, you see that the row headers stay fixed on the left side of the visual. You can use the analytics pane to add averages, medians, or maybe some target goal lines and things like that. So I invite everybody to read the article from the knowledge base, explore further examples that you will find in our knowledge base, and have fun with the Zebra BI tables visual.